Hola, ¿qué tal? Soy Dani Mantilla y estamos aquí en el Festival de Málaga, en el set de Kinótico que tenemos en colaboración con Legado Ibérico. Ahí está Sole de la Rosa. Y vamos a hacer la primera película del festival en la penúltima jornada, la primera entrevista en inglés, perdón, porque tenemos talento internacional. Alex Thompson, welcome.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Kelly O'Sullivan.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here in Málaga. We're going to do the interview in English. This is your first time here.
Yeah, first time in Spain.
When
and
they
Malaga.
called you and said you are invited to Málaga, I'm sure your first reaction is, where? What's Málaga?
No, I had heard of it.
No.
My dad had actually traveled here when
cool.
he was young, and he said it was a beautiful city and that the food was spectacular, and he was right.
This is your second film that you do together, right?
Is it?
Is it?
Like-
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
St. Francis.
Yeah, St.
that's
Francis.
Right,
Okay.
yeah. The first film that we co-directed
Yeah.
Was Ghostlight.
Ghostlight, yeah.
Yes, I
So-
was going to ask you about that because the first one you starred in it and you wrote it and you directed it.
That's right.
Why did you decide that this time around you had to do it together?
I mean, my interest in directing is just growing and growing. And I knew that I was not going to act in Ghostlight. There wasn't a part for me, and I wasn't interested in acting. I just wanted to be behind the scenes, and I wanted to have more and more agency in the ways in which the stories I write are told. And directing is the best way to do that.
Mm-hmm. And how did that affect the working relationship in this film? How did it change?
It was actually easier than on St. Francis because on St. Francis I was so aware that it was Kelly's script and Kelly's face. It just felt like I had this enormous responsibility to defer. Whereas with Ghostlight, co-directors, you're truly co-directors. So I feel a lot more comfortable saying like, I prefer this, or you're much more aware of the ways that you complement each other, I think.
Yeah.
So it was easy in some ways.
I haven't watched your first film, but I have to confess I'm surprised about how young you are because after watching the film, it feels like a quite profound story, also funny, which is an interesting thing. Where does this story come from for you guys, Ghostlight?
Well, for me, it really I started writing during the pandemic, and I'm a theater actor. I've always been a theater actor growing up. And so I was missing my community of theater actors. And then I think as I've gotten older, I've had a growing curiosity about men, like middle-aged men who who keep so many of their emotions repressed and who sort of have been socialized to keep so many of their emotions repressed that you almost feel like you don't know them. And so I was thinking about, okay, well, what if you put a character like that in a place where expression and emotion and vulnerability are really prized and really valued? And then I've also just been, because I've been getting older and now we're parents, I've been thinking about sort of stories that I learned when I was growing up, revisiting them from a parental point of view. And so Romeo and Juliet now has so much of a different meaning than it did when I was younger. When I was young, it was all about the romance and the passion, and now I just think it's about the impulsivity of youth and the way that the adults in their lives really failed them.
Why did you say that comedy, humor, had to be in this film?
Well, I mean, Kelly writes comedy so well, so I think if Kelly wrote comedy poorly, it would be a lot easier to say, like, let's cut that joke. But that's life, right? I mean, we don't, you've said this before, Kelly, but we don't decide, okay, today is going to be a drama day, tomorrow is going to be my funny day.
Yeah.
It's like you go outside, you step in a puddle, somebody dies,
Yeah.
you hear a joke that makes you laugh. It all happens all at once. There's an absurdity to real life. I think the less realistic films are the ones that intentionally carve away comedy and humor. I think that's not really the way my life is. So it just feels more honest, I think.
And comedy is very useful because it opens us up. Once we're opened up with laughter, then we're open to feeling things that are deeper than that. There's sort of like the laughter of recognition, the laughter of surprise, and it's sort of a uniting force. And then we can all cry together too.
I have to say that I laughed out loud in the scene where the daughter says, like, "Is this a threesome?" It was really, really, really funny.
Oh, good.
This is a story of a grieving family who is dealing with the loss of a young man, and then the theater comes up, and it's a way to deal with with emotion. There's something really interesting and powerful because you have cast a real family playing a fictional family. How did that happen?
Do you want to take it?
No, I'm happy for you to take it.
Well, I know Keith Kupferer, who plays the lead.
He's amazing.
He's unbelievable. I want everybody to see his performance because it really is Oscar level. But he and I did a play together 10 years before where he played my dad, and a very sort of similar character, kind of angry, kind of repressed. And so when I was writing the role, I wrote it for him. I was just thinking of him in that way. And then he has a daughter who is a teenage actor, and he emailed us and he said my daughter would kill me if I didn't ask if she could audition. And so she came and she did a reading, and she was incredible. I mean, she was like, they had this amazing chemistry as real father and daughter, and they seemed, I don't know, of course they seemed related because they are. And so we cast her, and then Tara Mallen, who is Keith's wife and Catherine's mother, runs her own theater company and is an incredibly celebrated actor. And so our casting director said, you'd be fools not to cast this entire family. So it wasn't written for them, but it feels like it was.
The film got 2 nominations in the Spirits, Best Actor and Best Film Under $1 Million, the John Cassavetes Award. Was it hard to find the money to make this film?
No, it wasn't. It was a struggle to convince people, but the nice thing is the community is quite small, and when you don't need a lot, it's easier to find. It was the same people that made St. Francis and that made my second film, Rounding, and it was all those people kind of brought just up a level. I think that what's nice about Kelly's scripts is they read the way the film watches, and you can really feel how much emotion and humor is going to be there. So,
how do you feel about the current state of American independent cinema?
Well, it feels like people are understanding at the studio level more and more that independent films can go the distance, which is very exciting. You still need a lot of money to promote a film, but to make it, I think you need less and less, and actors are understanding that too, which is great, because for us, a lot of times the barrier of entry into a major festival, which is the first step, is cast. And more you're seeing that cast understands that just because they don't have a trailer doesn't mean they're not going to be taken care of. So I think the state of the industry, the state of the filmmaking industry is quite good. Distribution is another question. I think that's a little scarier. They could learn a lot, I think, from Europe in the way that films are put out into the world. More egalitarian. Right now it feels like if you're not one of 10 independent films in America, you don't exist.
I was going to ask you about that because Anora had a great night in the Oscars, also in the Cannes Film Festival. And the Neon director confessed that the film, as it was discussed before, cost $6 million, but it took $18 million to make the campaign. Does it feel contradictory in a way, like to celebrate the success of independent films and then realizing that it takes a village and a lot of money for that to happen?
Yeah, I mean, it is sort of astounding when you hear about how much it costs to get recognized, to get any sort of, I don't know, to get Oscar attention or get any sort of huge industry attention. But Anora itself was so inspiring to us in the way that it was received, because Sean Baker, I mean, he's been making those tiny think for years and years.
He was also nominated for the John Cassavetes like 3 times.
Yeah,
I think.
Exactly. And Sammy Kwan, who was his producer, she just gave us notes on our latest film. And so they really are like walking the walk. But I don't know, it can be sort of daunting when you think about the amount of money that has to be spent on certain films in order to get attention.
Keith is amazing, as we were saying before, but I have to name also Dolly de Leon, which we know from Triangle of Sadness. She's amazing. How was working with her?
Dream, just the best.
Yeah.
I mean, she is so... because we had seen her in Triangle of Sadness, and her role in that film, is it's incredible, but it's also very intimidating. And so the first time that we talked to her, I was a little nervous. And then she's so warm, she's so funny, she's such a team player. She immediately fit into the ensemble because she's done decades of theater in the Philippines. And she didn't feel, it's not like she came on set and had a star attitude. She just was so invested in the script and in the relationship. and asked very, very insightful questions. And I would work with her again and again and again.
Why do we keep going back to Shakespeare? Because I think he was also in Sing Sing. He was the author of the play that they are playing in prison. What does Shakespeare do so well?
Well, I think he was writing about the human experience, and you know, despite the world around us changing, we're the same human beings that we were back then. We still have the same feelings of love and regret and envy, and all of these things are very fundamental to who we are just as people. And I think he does a really beautiful job of exploring all sides of that. Like, I didn't know as a kid, kind of like what you were saying, Kelly, that the parents were as well written as they are in Romeo and Juliet. But when you actually pull out their monologues and their lines, it's heartbreaking. You know, he understood what it meant to be a teenager in love. He also understood what it meant to be a grieving parent. It's really remarkable.
And there's something too about, I mean, speaking about Sing Sing, there's something about seeing sort of the common man do Shakespeare that is so moving, because during Shakespeare's time, it was plays for the people. You know, yes, it was written for royalty, but it was also for the people. And there's something really moving, I think, about seeing blue collar workers do poetry. Like, I was so affected in Sing Sing by watching the inmates do poetry and watching our construction worker do poetry that reminds us, oh yeah, it doesn't have to just be for the lofty people. It's for everyone, these grand emotions.
It also happened in an Italian film that won the Golden Bear like 10 years ago. I don't remember the name.
Caesar Must Die?
Yep.
Yeah.
With the brothers.
Very
yeah.
good.
Yep. I was going to ask you, something about, okay. Last day of festival. No. Are you guys writing a new film?
Yeah, we just actually picture locked. We shot this summer, and then we picture locked a new film that we're going to head into post-production for. And then this summer we're going to make a film, and then this fall we're going to make a film. So we're busy.
Oh, cool.
But we hope to come back with more films very soon.
And what kind of stories are you telling now?
I mean, for me, the ones that I write are always very centered on character and always very centered on relationships and how people are affected by their relationships with other people. And it's very much a comedic drama. And then you write some crazy stuff.
Yeah, so Keith and Katherine, we're doing a body swap film with the father-daughter body
That's
swap.
That's funny.
Yes, it is funny, thank God. But yeah, so it's very strange. But
did you have to be open? That was the thing I was going to ask before. Did you have to be open, like to improv, and because they have like their own chemistry, their own dynamic, or are you always open to that while you're doing a film? Was it special this time around with Ghostlight?
I'm always open to it, but I do make sure that we don't go off the rails. You know, I make sure that we get versions that are just purely the script, and then we'll have moments where we say, oh, that thing that you just said before we started rolling, say that now at the top of the scene. Or we're just going to let you guys go at the end, and there's a section in Ghostlight when they're getting ready for the deposition, and it's just the family improvising and talking to each other. So it's both, and then really choosing in the editing room, you know, how much we want to preserve.
This don't usually happen with Spanish press. I have to explain it. We have Sole de la Rosa here that offers us like Spanish ham if you want to try it.
Sure. I saw you over there carving the entire time.
Yeah.
I was getting very hungry.
It's like very Italian neorealism. Anything can happen here in Kinótico.
Is there do you say cheers? Do you do anything before? You just
Not really. We did, yeah.
Okay, great.
Maybe with wine, maybe with cheese.
Okay,
but
great.
It's very, very good.
always
delicious.
with ham. And we like to talk about the legacy of Spanish cinema. Is there any Spanish film that you are like taken by?
I remember the first time I saw Bad Education, and I remember as a kid not understanding why I loved it so much, because I was so I felt those emotions, but not at the level at the tenor of that film, and I think it's aged with me. Like I've returned to it.
I think that happens with the film itself, because when it was released in 24, yeah, it wasn't really understood. And then 20 years later, I think if you go back to it, it's impressive. And from a filmmaking point of view, it's wow. What about you, Kelly?
Pain and Glory with Antonio Banderas. I mean, I know that that's so beloved, but that really was very delicate, and it made me see him in a way that I had never seen him, and just incredible.
Thank you, guys. Please enjoy Malaga, Spain, and be back soon with all those films you're making.
Thank you.
Ghostlight se va a estrenar en España el 28 de marzo. Podéis verla estos días también en Málaga, pero queda recomendada desde aquí. Seguimos con más entrevistas en kinótico.es, la primera con K, la segunda con C. Hasta pronto.